Welcome to the Folio Sightlines blog. I'm Greg Vigress, President of Folio Institutional, and I'm glad to have with us today Bob Danhauser, Head of Private Global Wealth Management at CFA Institute. Bob is responsible for CFA Institute's private wealth management initiatives, including content development for practitioners, the positioning of the CFA brand to investors and practitioners in the private wealth space, and development of strategy. Previously, Bob headed the Global Capital Markets Policy area at CFA Institute. Bob, hi, and thanks for taking time to join me today.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
So today we'll talk about some of the many ways financial professionals can add value to their client relationships. We'll also try to dive into some very helpful CFA Institute research on the challenges and opportunities wealth management practitioners see in their business currently. Because there's a lot of information to cover, we have split this conversation into two parts. You're now listening to part two. I'd like to move on, talk a little bit about technology, something that is actually very near and dear to Folio. And although I think it's clear to say that technology is relevant to most of what we have talked about today, we haven't necessarily called it out specifically. You mentioned that your survey respondents worried about the non-traditional competitors, and clearly there's eyes on some of the large non-traditional competitors like the Googles and Amazons of the world that have already disrupted several industries. Is wealth management next?
Well, it's a great question. The Googles and the Amazons of the world are being kind of quiet about their plans, so it's tough to say definitively. But I don't think there's much argument that there are some near-term opportunities to use technology to smooth away some of the rougher edges of client experiences and focus on the value of interaction with a human advisor. And our survey work indicates that client experience definitely matters. Beyond that, the survey results suggest that CFA practitioners may have more sensitivity to clients' desire for enhanced digital access in the coming years relative to other wealth management practitioners. I found it interesting that when we sliced the responses by age of practitioner, we really didn't see much difference between how older practitioners thought about digital solutions versus younger practitioners. And I think that reflects the fact that we're all digital consumers, young and old, and it shouldn't be surprising that older practitioners and indeed older clients have appreciation for some of the benefits of technology. The near-term challenge for practitioners is integration and oversight of technology, which probably requires a pretty different skill set than what many practitioners have.
Yeah, certainly fair. We have observed what we refer to as sort of a digital engagement revolution, and practices and practitioners becoming more interested in and seeking to learn more about ways that they can automate certain points of the client engagement model and really shift their emphasis to the areas where the human advisor adds significant value to the relationship. Does that jive with what you're seeing? And if so, what are some of the elements that you see wealth managers and others involved in the practice really focusing on as their core emphasis and their core values?
Well, I think it is consistent, certainly, with the survey results. Recall that we said one of the top opportunities that practitioners reported to us in the coming years is a differentiated value proposition. And so I think really focusing on the quality of the human interaction and the behavioral aspects of investor behavior and the investor-counselor relationship, I think, is where a lot of people are focusing their attention and trying to create a differentiated value point for their prospects and for their clients. We're very interested in that in terms of our own research, because we think that probably most practitioners come to the table with some innate skills in managing client relationships, doing things like conflict resolution and effective communication skills, and managing what can be often emotionally fraught discussions with clients effectively, and managing their own emotions as a practitioner in the course of doing that. We think that there is some interesting work that's been done just within the last couple of years to help assess individual practitioners' capabilities in that regard, and then tune their skills in emotional intelligence so that they can be the most effective practitioner that they can be, given their innate qualities and skills, and leave less to chance about the quality of that human interaction. And we think that's going to be increasingly critical in the coming years as technology kind of takes care of a lot of the things that a human wasn't really adding a whole lot of value to in the past, allowing for more capacity for human advisors to really add value.
Yeah, I think that's And an interesting trend and one we'll keep an eye on. At Folio, we like to refer to something that we call the non-millennial millennial, which kind of gets to this notion that, it's far too easy to assume that those seeking digital engagement or a higher level of involvement meet a certain demographic definition, for example, millennials. And what you just mentioned is consistent with what we've seen, and that is, there's an entire segment of the population, potentially the largest and in control of significant wealth, that may not fit the demographic definition of a millennial, but are adopting the behavior patterns, the willingness to be mobile, the willingness to be digital, the willingness to engage directly. And I'm glad to hear that your survey points out that people are recognizing that and paying some attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, as with a lot of things, I think it's dangerous in this business to generalize. And so old techniques of slicing markets up by the age of the investor leaves a lot of insight on the table. And I think the smarter firms and the smarter practitioners are sort of looking deeper to try to understand behaviors of investors that aren't necessarily captured with such an easy demographic like how old they are.
So we've been discussing the value of premium wealth management survey work that you've done. It certainly covers a lot of ground. What do you think are the most important takeaways for practitioners?
Well, I'll go back to where we started and say that in an environment of change, doing the same things that got you to where you are today may not be a winning strategy for the future. The survey work that we did highlights many instances where client perspectives on the value of wealth management diverge from what practitioners think is valuable, both now and in the coming years. So I hope practitioners will be able to use some of the survey insights to think hard about their value proposition as a practitioner and their firm's value proposition, and consider how well positioned they are for the future. Defining a practitioner's value in an era of fast technological innovation is critical, and the reality is that it will be tougher to get paid to do lower value-add activities if tech solutions can do it faster and easier and cheaper, and perhaps most importantly, in a more pleasing way to clients. I think practitioners who invest in competence that will serve them well in a variety of environments will be valued in the marketplace. And I think those who take an intentional approach to optimizing their ability to work and interact effectively with clients will also do well. And, for all those practitioners who get all that right, developing competence and integrating tech smartly and making the most of their own innate emotional intelligence, it still remains to articulate that value to the marketplace. Work like the surveys we did reveal a lot about what clients want, but we still need to be able to explain effectively how we address those preferences. The practitioner survey respondents that we talked to got that right in my view. The idea that a differentiated value proposition communicated effectively will see practitioners through the changes ahead.
Bob, it's been great speaking with you today. I do have one more question that's top of mind for a lot of people. Will we see more coverage of the gaps between what clients want and practitioners think on the CFA exam?
So the exam and the curriculum that underlies it is always evolving with current practice, and we definitely pay attention to market intelligence like this when we think about how the curriculum will change. Indeed, the areas we've just talked about, ESG investing, behavioral finance, intergenerational planning, all those are already in the curriculum and have been for a while. But the reality is the exam can only be so big, and the curriculum is designed to prepare practitioners throughout the investment management ecosystem, not just wealth managers. So often we end up thinking about these topics in terms of continuing professional development, because beyond administering the CFA exam, we think we have an important role in keeping wealth managers on the leading edge of practice as the world around them changes. One of the questions we asked investors in the survey had to do with loyalty, with the factors that lead them to continue working with a wealth advisor. And proactivity around investment advice and risk management came back as important factors for clients in their decision to keep working with someone. To me, that sounds like clients want someone with the breadth and depth of knowledge to be looking around corners and anticipating both rewards and perils, even if the environment is very different than what we've considered as normal to date. I hope the CFA curriculum is an excellent start towards equipping someone to be proactive on behalf of their clients, but the learning really can't stop when they hang their CFA charter on their office wall.
It's a great point, and a great point to end on. Thank you, Bob. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and I think you've provided some really terrific insight that our listeners are going to value.
Thank you, Greg. It's been my pleasure.
If you'd like to receive more insightful tips about growing your business, sign up for Folio Institutional's blog at info.folioinstitutional.com/blog. Neither Folio Institutional, its parent, Folio FN Incorporated, or sister companies have a contractual relationship with CFA Institute. Folio has not compensated Bob Danhauser or CFA Institute in any way for this interview.